Let's look at another example of how we solve by completing this square. The equation 2x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Our first step is to move the constant to the other side of the equation. 15 is the constant. If I add a negative 15 to both sides of the equation, I can accomplish that first step. We now have 2x squared minus 8x is equal to negative 15. Our second step is to actually group our x's. We can accomplish this by putting a set of parentheses around the 2x squared and the 8x. Our third step, very important step, is to factor out the leading coefficient. The leading coefficient is the number multiplied to the x that has the degree 2, the highest exponent. When I factor out the 2, I have to remember it's being factored out of everything that was inside the parentheses. It's going to be factored out from the 2x squared, leaving x squared, but it's also going to be factored out from the negative 8x. How I factor this out is I take this negative 8x and I divide it by 2. Negative 8x divided by 2 is negative 4x. This is still equal to negative 15. So that is our step 3, factoring out the leading coefficient. Step 4, 5, and 6 all appear on the next line, but there are 3 separate actions that you need to take. In step 4, it says take half of the coefficient in front of the non-squared variable. So I'm going to take half of this. Now that's very different than factoring out 2. Every single time I take half of this number regardless of what it is. So for our next step, we still have the 2, the parenthesis, but I'm trying to complete the square. So the exponent 2 is going to come outside the parentheses when I complete the square. Now we take half of that coefficient. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. So we have our x, but the exponent is no longer with the x because the exponent is outside the parentheses. We have x minus 2, the quantity squared, which is being multiplied by 2, is no longer equal to negative 15 unless we keep the balance. So that's what that step 4 and 5 are talking about, that you really want to keep an equation equal. The way we do that is we look at this new number, negative 2, which is being squared, which is positive 4, which is being multiplied by 2. And that's what's get added to the other side of the equation. Negative 2 squared is 4 times 2 is 8. 8 gets added to the other side of the equation. Let's write down what we have. 2 times x minus 2, the quantity squared, is equal to negative 7. So I'm trying to solve this equation. Now that we've got it down to one variable x, we just have to get x alone. We get rid of the furthest thing first. This negative 2 inside the parentheses is really close according to the order of operation. And then I would do exponents according to the order of operations. So the furthest thing from x is multiplying by 2. The way that we get rid of multiplying by 2 is to multiply 1/2 to both sides of the equation. We now have x minus 2, the quantity squared, is equal to negative 7/2. In trying to get this equation, solve for x, get x alone, we have to get rid of the furthest thing, which is the exponent 2. In order to get rid of the exponent 2, we take the square root of both sides. When you take the square root, you need to write plus or minus in front of the radical. So we now have x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 7 over 2. Uh-oh. What happens when you take the square root of a negative number? That's right, it's a non-real number. So we're going to write I on the outside of the square root. So we have x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus I, square roots of 7/2. X is not alone. One more step To get x alone this time, we're going to add 2 to both sides of the equation. So our final answer for this problem would be x is equal to positive 2 plus or minus I square roots of 7/2. And there you have it. We have solved the equation for x.